Welcome to Trending Unpacked, where we make sense of what the world is searching for. Every year it happens like clockwork. The temperature drops, the holiday lights go up, and a really fascinating search trend starts to climb. People start looking for Christmas villains.
It's the ultimate seasonal contradiction, isn't it? I mean, just as the world is ramping up this immense pressure to be jolly and bright, there's this parallel spike in our sort of cultural craving for the opposite, for chaos, for cynicism, for even a little bit of fear. We seem to be drawn toward the figures who are just actively rejecting all that forced cheer.
Absolutely. The data is so clear on this. Every single year, right around early November, snuff terms for characters like, Ebenezer Scrooge, the Grinch, and even these much older, much more horrifying figures like Krampus, they just shoot up. So today we've gathered a whole range of sources, from literary critiques of Dickens to modern studies on folklore and internet trend reports, to really understand why. Why in the season that's all about light and generosity are we so pulled toward the darkness?
It's a really profound psychological thing. These sinister icons, they kind of serve as a dark mirror to all the traditional holiday stories that carry the weight of real-life holiday stress.
Oh, yeah, the pressure.
The pressure, the expectations, and that sort of buried, rebellion against having to be happy on command. And, the villain is so often more memorable than the hero.
Why do you think that is?
Because they just have the strongest personalities, they have the most complex flaws, and maybe most importantly, they're the ones who set the stakes for the whole story.
So today, that's what we want to unpack. We're going to analyze why these anti-hero holiday figures seem to resonate so deeply with you, our listener. And we'll focus not just on, their charm in movies, but on the deeper stuff. The morality, the isolation, and that often very difficult process of redemption.
Or, and I think this is a key point we'll get to, the complete and unwavering lack of redemption in some cases.
Right.
It's a journey that's going to take us from the foggy streets of Victorian London to the snowy mountains of the Alps, and then straight into the heart of modern meme culture.
So I guess the first place to start is just defining our terms. What even is a Christmas antagonist? What makes them essential to the story?
Yeah, let's get into that. Because we're talking about more than just a generic bad guy who shows up in December.
Exactly.
A true Christmas villain is a figure who actively and often very successfully twists the whole meaning of Christmas into something chilling. Or they represent one of those deep, systemic human flaws. Greed, apathy, selfishness that the Christmas spirit is supposed to fix.
Does it serve a purpose?
A vital one. They bring the moral chaos into the story that has to be overcome for the light, for the good ending, to really mean anything. They make the stakes feel real.
And if you're going to talk about the prototype, the absolute foundation for this entire archetype, you have to start with Ebenezer Scrooge.
Oh, Scrooge is the gold standard. He is the blueprint for transformation. And Dickens's descriptions of him they're just overwhelming. He's not just a mean old man. He's portrayed as something almost inhuman, a physical manifestation of cruelty.
He doesn't hold back.
Not at all. He doesn't just say he's miserable. He calls him, and this is the direct quote, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner.
Wow. That's a list.
It's a catalog of vices.
Yeah.
It immediately makes him monstrous, which is a very deliberate choice.
Because it makes his eventual turnaround that much more powerful.
Exactly. The journey is longer, so the destination feels more earned. And Dickens uses this extended metaphor where Scrooge is the literal embodiment of cold.
Right, I remember this. A frosty rime was on his head.
Yes, on his eyebrows and his wiry chin.
Yeah.
But then the narrator immediately clarifies that. He says it was the cold within him that froze his old features.
So it's not the weather.
It's not the weather. It's his soul. It suggests his hostility is so deep that he didn't thaw at 1 degree at Christmas. It's a moral coldness, not a meteorological one.
But there's that one line that always stands out to me, the line that hints at something more. Dickens describes him as secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster.
That simile. It's one of the most brilliant pieces of foreshadowing in literature. Our sources really dig into this because on the surface, it's just about his hard, closed-off exterior, right? But by choosing an oyster, Dickens is subtly telling you that despite the hard, dark shell, there's the potential for something incredibly valuable inside, the pearl.
So redemption is possible from the very beginning.
It's not just possible. He's signaling that it might be inherent to this deeply flawed man. The potential for change is the engine of the entire story. And it's why the sources stress that his development is deliberately gradual. It's not a sudden switch.
Right, it happens in stages. It's this 3-part therapy session with ghosts.
A 3-stage therapeutic review, exactly. The Ghost of Christmas Past starts it off, cracking the shell by forcing Scrooge to confront the loss and regret in his youth.
Like seeing the young boy singing a carol at his door.
And wishing he'd been kinder. That's the first time he actively wants to change something. He suddenly says he wishes he could say a word or two to his own clerk, Bob Cratchit. That's the first tiny crack in the armor.
And then the ghost of Christmas Present forces him to feel empathy.
Yes, by showing him Tiny Tim, a direct victim of the kind of poverty Scrooge just dismisses. And Scrooge develops an interest he had never felt before in whether the boy will live. He's starting to see the human cost of his own apathy.
But the real turning point, the thing that seals the deal, is the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Absolutely. And our sources are really clear about this. The spirit doesn't just scare him with death itself. That's not the point. It scares him with the consequences of his isolated materialistic life.
The indifferent.
The total indifference. He sees his own corpse being picked over and robbed by his laundress and his charwoman. And they justify it. They say he should have been more natural in his lifetime.
And his business colleagues, they just move on to talking about lunch.
That's the real horror for an adult reader, isn't it? The idea that a lifetime of hoarding wealth earns you absolutely nothing. No respect, no love, no one to even mourn you. It renders his entire life's work meaningless.
It's a brutal reckoning, and it shows him what his obsession truly cost him. We see it with his ex-fiancée, Belle.
Yes. She left him because, as she puts it, a golden idol had replaced her. She saw that he'd become someone who fears the world too much. Even his nephew Fred, who is relentlessly optimistic, points out that Scrooge's wealth is of no use to him because he doesn't do any good with it.
Which makes the ending so triumphant, because he does the exact opposite of everything he stood for. He gives this huge donation, tells Bob Cratchit to go buy more coal and make up the fires.
A direct reversal of his earlier stinginess.
And he becomes like a second father to Tiny Tim. He truly, fully earns his redemption.
The transformation is total. Now let's pivot for a second to another giant of holiday redemption who's a really interesting parallel. The Grinch.
The Grinch? Okay.
He's also described as an emblem of greed and cynicism, with a heart 2 sizes too small.
But what's fascinating about the Grinch is that his villainy isn't really about money. It's about materialism versus spirit. He doesn't hate people so much as he hates the noise, the packages, the frenzy of it all.
That's a crucial distinction.
Mm-hmm.
His motivation is to silence the joy. He genuinely believes that if he steals every physical object associated with Christmas, the presents, the roast beef, the decorations,
The last can of Who Hash.
everything, he thinks he can literally steal and destroy their happiness.
Huh.
He's trying to impose his own cynicism on the entire community of Whoville.
And his moment of transformation is so simple but so perfect. He's up on the mountain waiting for them to cry.
And they don't.
They sing.
They come out, link arms, and sing. And in that moment, he gets it. The stuff was never the point. The spirit, the community, the connection, it was Christmas.
You had to actually steal Christmas to figure out what it really was.
Exactly. And when that realization hits him, his heart literally grows 3 sizes that day. So like Scrooge, he goes through this profound psychological and spiritual change. His is just a lot faster, and he finds his humanity.
Okay, so we have these 2 great redeemable villains, the ones who go through the therapeutic ringer, as you said, and come out the other side. Now we have to talk about the one who serves as the control group in this experiment, the one who completely rejects the process.
We have to talk about Mr. Potter.
From It's a Wonderful Life.
Mr. Potter stands completely apart. If Scrooge is the miser who can be redeemed, Potter is. He's the unrepentant capitalist monster. He doesn't get a visit from ghosts. He doesn't need one to clarify his evil. He's just a bad person.
He's that systemic, everyday malice that doesn't need a supernatural push. And he hated George Bailey, not for any personal reason.
Rome was business.
It was because George's little building and loan stood between him and total financial domination of Bedford Falls. It was stopping him from turning the whole town into
Hopelessly corrupt Potterville.
And that fiery speech George gives him in his office is one of the most powerful takedowns in all of holiday cinema.
Oh, it's incredible. It's pure socioeconomic commentary.
Mm-hmm.
George forces Potter to see the community he's trying to exploit as actual human beings.
I mean, that quote is just iconic. George says, "Just remember, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath?"
And then he delivers the final judgment. He says, people were human beings to him as father, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. It's a direct contrast to the spirit of charity that Scrooge eventually learns. Potter sees human life as a commodity, full stop.
And what makes him so chilling is that he never changes. He doesn't just resist redemption, he doubles down on his villainy.
He steals the $15,000. And then, when George is at his absolute lowest point, suicidal. Potter tries to have him arrested for it. He is unaltered, unrepentant, and completely manipulative right through the end credits.
He's the idea that not all hearts will grow. His survival, the fact that he faces no consequences in the movie, makes him this terrifying reality check. Sometimes the villain is just a bad person who gets away with it.
And that really resonates with a darker, maybe more realistic part of being an adult.
It's a really powerful transition, isn't it? Going from the hope of Scrooge and the Grinch to the sheer stagnation of Mr. Potter. But let's pivot even further, because not all Christmas villains are literary characters or bankers in old movies. Some of them predate all of that. They're rooted in chaos and discipline.
This is where we get into some deep history and folklore. And our sources are so fascinating here because they note that the idea of a Christmas villain goes way back, long before Christian Christmas. It traces back to pagan winter festivals like Yule.
So darker times.
The darkest, coldest nights of the year. These stories served a very practical purpose. They were moral instruction. They were reminders about how to survive.
And the most famous figure to have a modern revival from that history is, without a doubt, Krampus.
Krampus, known as the shadow of St. Nicholas. He's all about balance. The idea that joy can't exist without consequence.
Right.
So in Alpine folklore, he shows up on Krampusnacht, December 5th, covered in fur, with horns, dragging chains, and carrying a bundle of birch switches.
So not exactly a stocking full of coal.
Not even close. He's there to punish the naughty children before St. Nicholas comes to reward the good ones. This isn't about redemption at all. It's about swift, terrifying retribution.
It's a brutal kind of moral instruction. It's teaching kids that misbehavior isn't met with disappointment. It's met with, well, violence, or even being abducted in a sack.
Exactly. The very existence of Krampus implies that joy and rewards have to be earned through good behavior. It sets up this necessary duality. Without the terrifying consequence he represents, the gifts from St. Nicholas don't mean as much. The fear validates the cheer.
And he's not the only one from that period, right? The sources also mention a figure called Frau Perchta.
Frau Perchta is, depending on the legend, arguably even more frightening. She's from Bavarian and Austrian folklore, and she visits homes during the 12 days of Christmas.
Okay.
And while she does reward the hardworking, she is infamous for how she punishes the lazy. She's known as the belly slitter.
Leave that. I'm sorry.
The belly slitter. The legend says she would punish lazy workers by slicing open their stomachs and stuffing them with rocks and straw.
Wow. Okay. That definitely puts a different spin on dreaming of a white Christmas. These were not whimsical figures. They were terrifying tools for social enforcement.
Precisely. Early winter traditions were all about survival and discipline. If you were lazy or dishonest, the whole community could starve. We see a similar thing with the figures from Iceland Grilla, a giantess who originally ate naughty children.
Ate them.
And her 13 sons, the Yule lads.
Who I always thought were just these quirky little pranksters.
Well, they are now.
Yeah.
But that's a key point our sources make. Modern culture has kind of sanitized these figures. We've softened these child-devouring demons into quirky, funny characters for tourism. We've domesticated the terror.
But at their core, their function was the same. Setting boundaries. Showing there are consequences.
Right, so you have this incredible spectrum. The redeemable miser, the unredeemed monster, and these ancient disciplinary demons. And the whole range of darkness that perfectly frames the holiday light. And that framework is why they're having such a massive resurgence online right now.
Which brings us to internet culture. It's not just that we're rewatching old movies. Social media has given these characters a whole second life.
A massive one. Streaming makes it so easy to watch these classics, which drives millions of rewatches, and then their quotes, their images, they just completely take over memes and merchandise every year. It's a real-time reinterpretation by a new generation.
And that reinterpretation often comes in the form of the villains were right trend.
Yes. The internet loves to reframe these antagonists as misunderstood or, as the most honest characters in the whole story.
You see that all the time with the Grinch. People post clips of him complaining about the noise and the commercialism, and the comment section is just full of people saying, honestly, same.
He's the honest voice in a world of consumerist madness. And that taps right into what some people call anti-hero holiday energy, especially with younger audiences. There's this real appreciation for complexity and honesty over simple, overly sweet morality.
It's easier to relate to Scrooge wanting to be left alone than it is to his nephew's, almost impossibly cheerful attitude.
It is. So the villains become these kinds of comfort characters during a really stressful season. They let us safely acknowledge all the things we're not supposed to feel, the stress, the anxiety, the isolation.
They're a release valve.
They're a perfect release valve against the pressure of the forced smile.
And you even have characters who exist in this weird middle ground, like Jack Skellington. He gets lumped in with villains, but his chaos is It's misguided, not malicious.
Jack is a perfect example. He's not evil at all. He's just having an identity crisis. He's the Pumpkin King, he's bored, and he's looking for a new purpose. He doesn't want to destroy Christmas. He wants to appropriate it.
And he fails spectacularly.
Because he fundamentally misunderstands it. His story is about that tension between identity and purpose. And it shows that festive disruption doesn't have to come from greed. It can come from a simple, if overly ambitious, misunderstanding.
This idea of festive disruption gets taken to its absolute extreme in holiday horror movies.
Oh, absolutely. In that genre, the contrast between terror and joy is the entire point. It's the whole delicious appeal.
Setting horror in a place of supposed safety and happiness just makes the horror so much more effective. It violates our expectations.
It proves that these supposedly safe, joyful settings can actually hide or even invite terror. Take a classic like Gremlins.
1984.
It's a masterpiece of blending comedy, horror, and some pretty sharp satire. You have this cute little creature that turns into a destructive monster on Christmas Eve, but the key is how it happens.
The rules? Don't get it wet, no bright light, and never ever feed it after midnight.
And what are those rules, really? They're a metaphor for unchecked consumerism. The Christmas gift, the mogwai, comes with fine print. And the failure to follow these simple rules of self-control is what unleashes chaos. It's a critique of that holiday pressure to just acquire things without thinking about the consequences.
Then you've got the straight-up slasher films. Our sources pointed to Black Christmas from 1974.
A pioneering film. It genuinely shocked audiences by setting this brutal horror story inside a sorority house during a Christmas party. It basically invented the trope that the safe, festive home can be the most dangerous place of all.
And you see that idea revived in modern films, like the 2015 Krampus movie.
That movie is a perfect modern example. It's about this deeply dysfunctional family whose fighting and loss of faith literally summons the ancient demon to their door.
So the message there is that their internal conflict, the greed, the resentment, it breaks down the spiritual protection of Christmas, and that makes them vulnerable to external punishment.
It brings that old folkloric idea right into the modern messy family home. The idea that joy and safety must be earned through good behavior and genuine connection.
So if we bring all of this together, from Scrooge's soul-searching to Krampus's birch branches, what's the big takeaway? Especially for us as adults, why do we find ourselves sympathizing with these dark figures so much more now than we did when we were kids?
Because as adults, we finally understand their flaws. We understand isolation. We understand regret. We understand the pressure of money and keeping up appearances. And at a story level, villains just make the light brighter. Without them, the hero's triumph feels, well, less satisfying.
And the more you look at Scrooge's story, the more human his flaws seem. Dickens goes into such detail about his isolation. Nobody ever stopped him in the street. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him and would pull their owners away.
The complete separation from humanity allowed him to live in this state of willful ignorance about poverty. He saw the poor as a concept, a problem to be solved with prisons and workhouses, not as people. His change could only begin when the ghosts forced him to actually engage, to see the human cost of his worldview in someone like Tiny Tim.
And his regret feels so real. It's not just a quick, oh, I was wrong.
No, it's deep. The spirits force him to genuinely wish he had lived differently. There's that heartbreaking moment when he sees a family and wistfully wonders what it would be like to have children who might have called him father. And the book says his vision grew very dim indeed, which heavily implies he's weeping.
Without that vulnerability, his change wouldn't feel believable.
It would feel hollow. That moment of true regret is what makes his transformation powerful. It's what proves Dickens' point that anyone is capable of change.
We also can't forget what his materialism cost him personally. It wasn't just an abstract flaw. He actively sacrificed his own happiness for it.
That's so crucial. We see it in the flashback with his fiancée, Belle. She leaves him the moment she realizes a golden idol has replaced her in his heart. He chose wealth over love. The spirits basically have to teach him that hoarded money is meaningless.
These characters also function as symbols of resistance to forced cheer, which has to be why they trend so hard during what is, for many people, the most stressful time of year.
Absolutely. The holidays come with all this pressure, financial, emotional, logistical. The villains embody our internal rebellion against all of that. And Scrooge, in the beginning, is the ultimate anti-holiday figure. His character is made even clearer by the people around him.
His foils, like his nephew, Fred, and his old boss, Fezziwig.
They're perfect moral benchmarks. Fred is the embodiment of unconditional optimism. He chooses family and happiness over wealth, which just highlights how Scrooge's wealth has only brought him misery. And Fezziwig is the anti-Scrooge as an employer.
Right. Fezziwig throws this huge, joyful Christmas party for his employees. Meanwhile, Scrooge is complaining about having to give Bob Cratchit one day off with pay.
The contrast is everything. It's what makes Scrooge's eventual transformation into as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew feel so complete and satisfying. The ghosts teach him about the past, the present, and the future. They show him that his actions have real, lasting consequences.
This whole analysis of redemption and unrepentance brings us full circle. It brings us back to that core comparison that some of our sources made, which takes this literary framework and applies it to our modern world.
This is where the literary critique becomes contemporary commentary. The sources we looked at explicitly use this difference between the redeemable villain, like Scrooge, and the unrepentant one, like Potter, to ask some really tough ethical questions today.
And it is so important for us to state here that we are just impartially reporting on the analysis presented in our source material.
Of course. The sources basically ask this critical question. Is it possible for a contemporary public figure, who they describe as having a many sizes too small heart, to have a Christmas life review and genuinely rediscover their humanity the way Scrooge did?
Or are some people just Mr. Potter?
Or are some people just Mr. Potter? And the source material really focuses on consequences. It makes the point that while we all might wish for a Dickens-style redemption, the example of Mr. Potter, who faced no punishment at all, suggests that for some unrepentant figures, real change might require external accountability first.
So the source uses these three archetypes, the repentant, the redeemed, and the unyielding, to analyze whether a real-world figure who they compare to Potter can change on their own without facing consequences for their actions.
It's just a profound example of how these timeless literary ideas, greed, isolation, consequence, change, are still the best tools we have for analyzing modern ethics and behavior. These aren't just children's stories, they're a framework for adult social critique.
What's really so fascinating is how these villains are always able to hold up a mirror to the vices of any given era. Whether it was Dickens attacking the materialism of the Industrial Revolution or modern stories critiquing systemic greed, the villain is always there to define the darkness, so we know what light to strive for.
They teach us such a vital lesson. Just demanding cheer and ignoring the darkness doesn't make the joy real. You have to acknowledge the capacity for greed and cruelty in the world and in ourselves to truly appreciate compassion and connection. The hope means the most when it's been earned.
That is a really profound thought to carry into the holiday season. Thank you so much for helping us unpack why we just can't seem to quit these Christmas villains. Maybe this year we'll appreciate the light a little more because we understand the darkness they represent.
My pleasure. It was great to talk about.
Next time on Trending Unpacked, we're switching gears to a softer kind of trend unpacking chocolate nails, the beauty look quietly taking over social feeds. Join us then.